you to come and be a part of that ministry. So last week we looked at part one of God's will, kind of discerning how do we find God's will. And the thing is, when we think about God's will, we think about like, okay, God, what is your will for this career path that I'm supposed to take? We think about God's will for the big things. But I wonder if we're seeking God's will for, what do you want me to do today? When we get up out of bed in the morning and we're ready to go for the day, do we wonder what God has in store for us? Do you ever find yourself thinking about, okay, what's this day going to face? Whether it's good or bad. But a lot of times it's when it's, oh great, we have the negative attitude and we're like, yeah, what's God going to throw at me today? What if we came at our day a little differently? What if we came and we looked at our day and said, how can I be a blessing today? What is God going to put in my path today that I can use to help another person, or I can do to even strengthen my faith in God? Because each and every day, not just Sunday morning, should be about God. Every day. So I want to talk a little bit, briefly, about God's will in a couple of areas. So the first one is our heart. Proverbs 16:9 says, in their hearts, humans plan their course. So in their hearts, humans plan their course. We kind of map out the way that we want things to go. But there's a second part to that. It says, but the Lord establishes their steps. So we can plan out everything that we want to do with our lives, but God establishes where we put our foot down. God is ordering our steps. So first thing we need to think about is, where's our heart? Where is our heart focused in life? Yesterday, I had to sit through an ethics class, Christian ethics. I don't advise it for anyone. But one of the things that we talked about was how we seek self. We're naturally made to think about us. And it's difficult to think about other people sometimes because it's not our first instinct. But when it comes to our heart, it's okay to be selfish. Does that make sense? It's okay to be about us. Because you see, when we're always about other people, it may not be a good thing. Because you see, what's in your heart is what's going to come out when you're interacting with other people. And so if God's not in our heart, if we're not in a place where God wants us to be in our relationship with Him, it's hard for us to communicate in a healthy way to other people. So where's our heart? Think about a building. For example, like this building. Who could make this building? Who could draw up the plans and make a building like this? Anybody? Yeah, I couldn't either. I wouldn't know where to begin. I look at blueprints. We have the blueprints upstairs. I look at the blueprints. I'm like, okay, that room's right there. I have no clue what the squiggly lines around it mean. But I mean, it's a difficult thing. But see, here's the thing. God orders our steps. Let's look at an example of two young girls You see, God orders our steps. So one morning, a girl discovers some blocks. And she starts to stack these blocks on top of each other, and she begins to make this structure. It's not a pretty structure. This is kind of a 2-year-old girl. And so she's just kind of learning and getting her coordination down and how to put things into place. And her parents start to watch her. And they start to play with her and cheer her on and encourage her. And then she gets all excited and she knocks the building down and then she stacks them all up again. And that seems to be her favorite toy. But then she gets a little older and she gets a drafting board set and she begins to like art and she begins to draw out different pictures, and her parents are encouraging to her. And as she gets older and gets into high school, she discovers math, that she's good at math, and she likes these numbers and how they all work together, and she likes that they also go inside with this gift that she has for drawing and just this creative process that has been born in her at such a young age. And she begins and she grows up and she becomes this architect that makes these plans for beautiful churches to be established and to grow. And she makes this art. And it was all because God began to order her steps at a young age. How did he order just her steps? He didn't just order her steps, but he was in the motion of the heart of her parents as they encouraged her and they built into her and they gave her the things that she needed to continue to develop her gifts and her skills that she had. But then there's another building. This building, though, is stuck. This building is stuck in the heart of another 2-year-old. It's a building we'll never get to see. We'll never have the opportunity to see this building. You see, because this other girl, she grew up in a different home. And one morning, she was building her blocks. She was having fun. She was loving it. And then her alcoholic father came out and saw her. Says, "What is she doing up?" and knocks her blocks over. And she runs away crying until he tells her to get out of here. You see, that gift that God wanted that child to have is now locked away in her heart. Because of our actions. You see, we can help other people on their journeys. You see, it's not just simply about our journey that God orders our steps. He's in the steps of other people by using us to speak into people's lives and to encourage them to be the person that God created you to be. Who are the people around you that you see something in them that other people don't see? Build into their life. Adopt them in a way that they need so that God can begin to work through you. I promise you that it won't be just God working through you and to another person, but God will be building you. God will be revealing things about you that you never knew that you had the capacity to do, simply because you were willing. The second thing that's important that we look at is our motives. What is the motives behind us seeking God's will? What are the motives? In James 4:3, it says, "When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives." You ask with wrong motives. The literal translation here for wrong motives is it means you're sick. Your motives are sick. It's not that they're wrong. It's just they're not the best thing for you. Because you see, we're really good at this. We're really good at praying, God, will you do this in my life? I really feel like this is the next step for me, or I really feel like this is the job for me, and you don't get the job. And who are you mad at? Who are we mad at? Are we mad at the person who didn't give us the job? No. Are we mad at the other person who got the job? No. We're mad at God, right? God did not listen to you. How dare he not listen to you? I know what's best for me. Do you? But we get mad at God. But what God is really saying is, that was a great job. It would have been great. But you know what? It's not great for you. It's not the right job for you. I've got something different in store for you. You see, that's kind of my story. You see, I personally wanted to, be an FBI profiler. Yeah, only a sick, demented person like me would want a job chasing serial killers. But that's what I wanted to do. The mind interests me, and so it's just a weird way of being interested in the mind, I guess. But, my sophomore year of college, I felt called to ministry. I didn't give in to God until my junior year of college. So I fought with God for a year because it was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm interested in. But after a while, the things that used to interest me about the mind, about criminal justice, about law, seemed to take a back seat to God. Seemed to take a back seat to wanting to learn more about him. All of a sudden, the criminal justice books got put on the shelf, and I started reading other books, and it was like, I'm not interested in this, but I'm interested in this. Why am I interested in this? And all of a sudden, I'm a youth sponsor in a youth group, and I'm helping out with young kids, and I'm making these connections with them, and it's really neat now to look back and to have one of these teens that I worked with in the youth group call me up and, talk to me and stuff, and to see where they're at in life now. And I think back and I'm like, I would have missed out on all of that because that's not what I wanted to do at all. And, now I have that interest for the law and criminal justice, and I'm able to take that interest that I once had and that education that I received, and I'm able to use it with people I meet. And it's like, well, God, why'd you take that away from me? Well, he had to take it away from me. He had to change the motives of my heart for me to accept the call that he wanted me to take, and that was towards ministry. So later, when I'm in ministry, he gives me that love, that passion for the law and the criminal justice system. And now it's back, and it's like, oh, okay, great. Now I guess I'm supposed to use this somehow. And so in thinking about that, I heard a story about a psychiatrist that had one of his patients that came in, that he owned a construction business. And he was telling the psychiatrist, he's like, I think I need a job change. He's like, I don't find any value in the work that I do. I go out, I build this house and I make it, and I go in debt, then I sell the house and I make tons of money, and then I just turn around and do it again. He's like, there's just no life in it for me. I think God's calling me to ministry. The guy's like, why? So he probes a little more and he talks about it. And as the psychiatrist is telling the story, he was like, I don't think God was calling him to ministry. This was a Christian psychiatrist, by the way. Then a couple of weeks later, he has another guy come in. He's also a very wealthy man that owns his own construction firm. And his life isn't doing all that great. And he's like, my life is horrible. He's like, but the only thing I have in my life is my work. He's like, I find so much satisfaction in the job that I do. And he's like, yeah, what is that? He's like, I own a construction firm. I build houses for people. And he's like, oh, really? I have a number to give you to talk to, this other guy about, not liking your job all that much. But this guy said, I love what I do. And psychiatrist asked him, why? Why do you love? And he's like, well, what I do, he said, when I first get a piece of property, he goes, I go up in our helicopter, so he was pretty wealthy. He went up in a helicopter and he looks at the plot of land that they're going to build this house on, and he begins to vision what the house is going to look like, what the backyard is going to look like. And he says, I can begin to see the kids playing in the backyard and where I'm going to put the swing set in the backyard. And do they need a pool or do they not need a pool? Or, how big does the yard need to be versus the front part of the yard? He's thinking about all of these details and how they all go together. And he says, then my architects, they draw up the plans, and I sit down with the architects and I look at the plans and like, oh, no, you can't put the staircase there. You can't, that's the room that the staircase comes down into isn't big enough. It's got to be bigger so that when their daughter comes down the stairs for the first time in her prom dress, that everyone can be looking up at her and just see the beauty as she comes down for the first time. Oh, you can't put that wall there because you're going to close off the kitchen from the dining room, and now the mom won't be able to interact all that much with the family, and you can't have the kitchen or the dining room separate from the living space because you want to make it all part of their life as they're going through life. And it's like, man, I want to live in one of his homes. Because he puts so much of his own passion and love into these homes. But he's not thinking about his motives. You see, the motives that he is using, he's thinking about other people. He's thinking about how he can use his gifts to not just build a structure, but to honor God in creating a family environment. We don't need houses with blocked off walls and everyone in their separate space. Let's open it up so that everyone can be together. But the first guy had his motives in the wrong place. He wasn't seeking to do things for other people. It was all about what enjoyment can I get. Now, don't get me wrong. There is part of, I believe that God gives you a passion, a joy in your heart for the things that he's calling us to do. But what are the motives behind why we want to do something? Why do we want to do things? I think when I think about motives, I think about even the church. What are our motives behind doing something like Served? What are our motives behind, doing Smart Choice Food? Or what are our motives behind Sunday morning? Is it just to entertain people? Is it just to please people and make everyone in the room happy, which is like impossible because it can't happen? What are our motives? What are our motives for coming to church? Here's a hard one. What are your motives behind your giving? You see, because your motives reflect why you do something. Do you give to the church so that you can get a tax break at the end of the year? Just to let you know, you're going to have to give a ton of money for that tax break you get is actually going to make any significant difference in your taxes. So just, if you want that tax break, talk to me. I'll let you know how much you need to give. But when we give, it should be because we want God to do something with this that we couldn't do. And I don't know if you guys know this, but because I say this because I read a statistic this week that there's a lot of people in churches that don't know that churches are actually funded by you. So like the United Methodist Church as a whole, they don't give us any money. They want us to pay them. So you are the suppliers of, you keep the lights on. The ministries that we do, that's all you. And so just know that. Know that you're giving to something that is fruitful, that takes a lot. One of the things I think about with my finances, I think about all the time when I'm sitting down and I'm going through our bills. Man, if we just had that money that we gave for that, stupid part I had to put on the truck because it broke down, we could do this. One of the things is I was thinking over the last couple weeks, I've never done that with my tithe. And I'm not saying that to say, hey, look at me. I share that because when it's going someplace that that God honors, that God can use this in a way that you can't, you don't miss it. I've never thought about, hey, if I just had that money that I gave to the church, I could do so much more, or I could have so many more things in my house that is too small for me to put anything else in. Heck, I could build a bigger house if I had, But it's that part of me that says, God, it's His. When I sit down, and I found myself doing this, and I'm trying to change my habits. You see, because, not me, my wife is cheap. She didn't, when we were at Westview, she said, just write one check a month so that we go through less checks. Don't write a check every week. So I kept that practice, and the more I'm like, okay, I don't write the check for my tithe until the end of the month. I was like, I really feel like I'm giving God what's left over. I always gave the full tithe. I never shortened it based on if I had the money. I always gave my full tithe. But I still just felt like I was giving Him the leftovers. I'm like, I don't like that idea. So I've started changing, and now I write a check every week. Because now it takes a discipline to be able to say, okay, week 3, I just paid our credit card bill, and is there going to be any money left in the checking account? There's not. Okay, I've got to pull from the savings to pay the tithe. I've got to do it. I'm paying it. How can I spend differently next month so that I'm not having to pull? Because you see, a lot of times we say in our finance world, we say, oh, okay, I can't afford to pay my tithe because I've got all these other bills. I've got a $400 cell phone bill. I've got a $200 cable bill. I've got all of these extra things. But sorry, God, I'll give you this amount. because that's what I have left. But you see, if you change your mindset, if you change the motives of how you handle your finances, you look at it in a way like this. Okay, this is my tithe. This is what I set. And I said, okay, my income is this. I make this much money. And so 10% of that is this much. And I break that down into a month. And then I say, okay, a monthly. So every week, this is how much I give to the church to meet my tithe. And I don't look at my bills and say, sorry, God, I can't. I look at my bills and say, if I have to say I can't to God, I need to look at my bills and say, what can I not do here? You see, because it's a priority. It's the motives of our heart. Are we saying, God, cable is more important than me paying my tithe? God, this really awesome 2015 car is more important than paying my tithe. What are the motives of your heart? That's really hard to hear, and why the reason I'm using tithe is because that's the one that hurts the most. Because we're talking about money, that's a touchy subject. But here's something that's really hard to hear. What you give and how you give isn't all that much a matter of it reflecting your finances as much as it reflects your relationship with God. You see, if we give to God last, we're probably going to tend to put God last. But if we say, you know what, God, you're more important than this that is an extra for me. You know, I love when people come in and they ask for assistance because they're giving me permission to be nitpicky in their life. Not really, but I do it. They come in and they're like, you know, I really need gas money to get to this doctor's appointment. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me pull out my $400 phone that had my $400 yearly bill and ask for gas money. Like, go get a different phone plan and come back and talk to me when you don't have any more money. You know, I ask them to tell me, what are all their bills? What are all the bills you pay? When I look on there and I see a $60 wireless, home internet bill, what do you need that for? I know it's possible to live without it because I don't have it. I may want it, but I don't have it. But does our heart and our motives line up? I challenge you to think of that beyond just simply finances. That's just an example. Think about your relationships with your friends. I was thinking, I'm a bachelor this weekend because I took the class. Jennifer and the girls went up to her dad's. So I came home and I'm thinking, man, what are all the things that I can do that I don't get to do normally? And then it was like, what if I took the time to do something that I actually needed to do rather than wasting it on, just piddly fun stuff or sitting on the couch watching TV? So I got some stuff done. So that enables me to, when the girls come home, I'm able to put things away, and I don't need to be focused on what I need to do because now I've got more free time because I took advantage of the time that I had. You see, I could have been all about me. How are we good stewards of our time? Because we all get 24 hours a day until like first week of November. Then I don't know what we get. It's either 25 or 23. I don't know what. Oh, by the way, first Saturday night in November. Clocks forward, backwards. I never remember the little scenario, but anyway, that was extra. Leave your tip at the door. Think about how your motives line up with God's will, because he's ordering your steps. But the question becomes, when our foot hits the ground, will it line up with where God wants our foot to be, or do we tend to go this way? If you have the internet this week, or if you haven't read the story, I challenge you to look up the Footprints poem. Don't just look at that in the scenario of what God does for us. Look at that in the scenario of God's will for your life. You see, God's will isn't that you have two sets. God's will truly for you is that you walk in the path that he set for you.